Okay, and welcome to another episode of The Focal Thought. My guest today is Krystal Pereira. How are you, Krystal?
I'm good, thanks, Croydon. How are you?
Good, good, thanks. So I'm excited to have you on. I remember many years ago, I was updating my resume and applying for a job, and I just sort of ran some questions by you. And these are sort of like the basic questions that people go through when they're applying for a job and they have the interview coming up. And for me, which was, spending nights on end thinking about these questions and contemplating what I should say, you just basically gave me the answers straight up. And it seemed so easy for you. And the answers made sense. And, it was like uh, answers that no one would say took a lot of preparation in the background. And that was really great because it really helped me, on the job front. So, which leads me to talking about HR or human resources, which I think in a company sort of takes the background setting. We know HR when we're applying for jobs and we do our interview. I often think that HR is like IT in a company. It's sort of sitting in the shadow, but it's really something that's really important because, like for IT, without the computer systems functioning, the company is not able to execute. And with HR, without having the proper channels in place, the proper plan in place, you don't have the proper employees in place. So in this podcast, I really want to start by talking about what you're a specialist on, which is
organizational development.
And then we might drill it down to the person themselves. So is that sort of true? Like HR is very important to the company. And if you can explain, basically what
Organizational development is.
Yeah, sure. I think that's actually why I ended up getting into HR. That wasn't my original plan. I was in the Bachelor of Commerce program at U of T, and studying all different aspects of what impacts a business, what makes it successful. And there's all these heavy hitters like marketing and sales and finance and business strategy, and those are all great. And then I remember I took a course on organizational development in second year of university. And they talked about the fall of, I believe it was Enron at the time, and there's so many, there's so much of diagnostics on what happened at Enron. But what was so interesting to me, at least, was we learned about what was going on with the people at Enron, the culture at Enron, the the fear that had built up there, the inability for anybody to speak up, this culture of blame, and it was amazing to me that the culture is what ultimately led to its demise, because in an organization it's the people that run the organization. So it was the first sort of moment where I realized that the the most important and most I think valuable asset any organization has is its people, because you can replicate somebody's marketing strategy or sales strategy, but it is extremely hard to replicate their culture. It's extremely hard to replicate a workforce of people that are not just skilled and intelligent, but are passionate, that fit together, and that work like this seamless, not a machine, but you know what I mean, like the seamless organization that just kind of gets things done. It's very hard to replicate that, and it cannot be a cookie cutter solution. You can't just go and see, oh, what's Google doing? Let me just do that, because that may not work in your culture at all. So I found that really, really fascinating, which is why I got into it. So you're absolutely right. We're not, the front of the, we're not the people at the front of the stage. We're kind of behind the scenes, for sure. And it's kind of a good place to be, because we kind of get to see everything, especially in organizational development. Organizational development is basically the way I see it. Like I find that, I like to explain things in a way that if I had to explain this to a 5-year-old, we make things better, faster, easier, so that people can just come to work and do what they love, and eventually just, get to the highest potential of what they could be, the best that they could be at their job. That's really how I see my job. Remove the obstacles, remove the pain points, create channels and ways so that people can just come to work, do what they love, and do it better today than yesterday and better tomorrow than today. That's kind of how I see it, and it's super fascinating because not a single day at work is the same. There's no come to work, clock in, do my little, create my widgets and kind of go home. And I love that. Like, I love coming, not knowing what today will be about. I love that I get to be creative and get into different businesses and learn what makes this business tick. What matters to the employees here, and how can I create solutions for them that speak to them, that are meaningful to them, that when somebody that's on the front line of that business comes into work, it has made an actual difference in their day, and it's made their lives easier, and it makes it more possible for them to do even better in their job, because I think everybody wants to do that. So I think that's how I see organizational development, and especially organizational development. We are so in the background, and I almost see us as like, we kind of get to sit. I had a mentor once say this, where we're almost like the Wizard of Oz a little bit. We kind of sit behind the scenes, pulling a little bit of those levers and buttons and stuff, because we kind of get to see this big 10,000 feet picture of the company, seeing where we are today, where we were 5 years before, and where we want to be 10, 20 years ahead, and what do we need to do today to get us there. That, I think, is just super fascinating.
No, very well said. And you touched on something that, in my early years of studying businesses, I was very focused on the product, and then also on the process of delivering the product. But then the people really also, to a very large extent, become the actual business themselves. Because, like you're saying, if you hire the right people, and if they're congruent following the mission and the vision of the business, then that also will help the process better, will help to get the product into the marketplace better. And I was very recently having a chat with a friend of mine who was in the restaurant business. And, in the restaurant business, you're looking after your customers, your product, the inventory, etc. You're trying to, bring down costs, maximize your profits. But he was saying most of his time, surprisingly, was spent managing the people, looking after the people, and also taking care of some of the baggage / stresses that the people brought into their workplace, from their lifestyle. So you can have the best executive leadership team, you can have the best product out there, the best process to deliver that. But like you're saying, if you don't have the people management and having the right people in the correct positions and having that culture congruent, then that's really not going to help, right? Deliver the business.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just this past week, we were studying, I was taking a course on Lean Six Sigma, which is the Japanese methodology of making processes extremely efficient. And we learned the case of this company, the partnership between Toyota and GM Motors. So Toyota was looking to expand into the US. And I apologize if I get any of the details wrong, but Toyota was looking to expand to the US at this time. And instead of coming in and just starting up a brand new plant, they partnered with GM, and they picked one of GM's lowest performing plants. And this was called the NUMMI project. And they picked the lowest performing plant. And the reason this plant was the lowest performing was because they had so many employee issues. There was just grievances from the union all the time. There was animosity between management and employees. There were so many issues constantly, Yeah. And Toyota picked this particular plant to, debut in the US because they wanted to come in and turn it around. And the reason they did that was because they felt that by doing so, they will learn more than if they just picked up a successful plant and, and started from there. But what was incredible was that within 1 year, that plant went from the worst plant performing in GM's sort of portfolio over to the best. How incredible is that? And the reason for that is because it wasn't that they improved the technology, they didn't improve the product of GM, they didn't improve the processes necessarily. What they did was, and they took the same group of people, they didn't just fire all these people and hire new people. Same group of people 1 year later are the pride and joy of this company, and what happened was that they empowered them. They trained everybody, and they gave both the management and the employees all the tools and the motivation, and most importantly, the trust to say, you own this product, you own this plant, let's work together. We're going to make sure you have what you need, and we're going to trust you to own that this product will deliver high quality, vehicles at the end of it. And within 1 year, what a difference it made. That tells me that people are not just one of the factors. To me, they are the make or break factor. You can have the best product out there, but if the people are not motivated to develop it or create it in, as a high quality product, or if they're not always looking out to say, how can we be a better and better company, you won't last very long in this business world, right?
Sure. And I like that because you're empowering the person or the employee as if they were the owner of the company, right? You're giving them that authority and the leadership to make their own decisions. And that builds up their confidence and motivation to do well in the workplace.
Exactly. It was incredible because with this case, what they basically implemented was the ability for any employee at any time to basically stop production and say, hold the phone, something's wrong here, and then have a commitment to them that when they do that, a supervisor will be there within minutes to help them figure out the problem and solve it. And I remember, we were listening to this case study, and the executives at the time were saying, whoa, you're telling me you're going to give any employee the right to stop production? And their response was, no, we're not giving them the right to stop production. We're giving them the responsibility to stop production. And so that's that mindset, of like, we own the company together. If you think about, Southwest as a company, Southwest Airlines, where every employee is an owner, you've seen those ads, right? And then you see the creativity, the passion, that extra something that they put in their job because they feel like they are owners, because they are part of a team that they're a family, you know what I mean? All working towards one objective that they all agree on. Like, I think when you have that kind of a formula in your company, that's magic. And it's very, very, very hard to replicate.
Correct. Now, say if you were going to implement a practical strategy, so you've got a company and they have this product that's in the marketplace, and say you've stepped into the role and you're in charge of developing and designing the organizational culture. What are some of the first steps you're looking at to sort of implement a routine? Are you looking at the product and matching the culture to the product? So say, for example, if it's ExxonMobil with oil, that'll be very different from, say, Virgin with its sort of rock star branding on its products, right? So when you're having, to hire people to come into these companies to work, and also, making the companies sort of reflect the branding of the product. So, Silicon Valley, where you have Facebook workers sort of in a cafeteria style table setting, rather than, the walls with the office in a, say, investment banking sort of world. So are you looking to maybe first steps, sort of look at it from the product as the starting line, or would the culture sort of match the product in retrospect?
That's a really interesting way, Gordon, of thinking of it. I remember once I was at a volunteer event, and there were multiple companies there. I think there was IBM, there was an insurance company, there was also a marketing company, and you could tell how different the cultures were just by looking at the group of people, from each of those groups that were participating in this volunteer organization. I don't necessarily think it's actually the product itself,
Okay.
that drives the culture. I think what you look at, so I would say, first of all, coming into an organization, the first thing I would do is understand the organization itself. How does the first of all, obviously the business itself, the product, all of that stuff, but also the people themselves. Like, I would, before we tell, we ask, so I first have to understand, where are we today? What is our current state? Where have we come from? What's the history? Right? Where are there gaps, if any? What are we doing really well? Sort of almost like a SWOT analysis of our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. What are our competitors like? Where is our talent at? Where are there opportunities to improve? What is our leadership bench strength? What is the maturity of the organization? Because you cannot come in as an organizational development consultant and say, okay, this is what I think our culture should be, and now I've dictated that, now everybody follows suit. It's not one of those things that you can just make happen. It has to start, or at least for me, I found very helpful to first come in and understand where are we today, and learn from the people who already run the business. Because it's like, first, in order to figure out where we need to get to or how we're going to get there, we have to start with, okay, we're on step 1 today. So tomorrow we're going to move us to step 2, then step 3, then step 4. We can't have people jumping to step 10 right away. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you have to sometimes make incremental changes to get us to our long-term sort of end game, you know? And then in terms of designing the culture, I mean, some companies do it where the top management decides, like, this is the culture we want, and they institute it, you know. In other areas, it's more grassroots, and they let it sort of come from the bottom up. I believe, I would say culture really, it does need to come from, or at least the tone really needs to be set by the leadership, you know, by the top leadership, because if they don't walk the walk, nobody else will, you know. So if the leadership really cares about a particular thing, so as an example, say safety or empowering people, whatever it is, but if they come in and they don't take that seriously, and what I mean is not just, you know, the checkbox, but when push comes to shove, when it's actually inconvenient to care about that thing, and then they show that they care about it, that's when it matters. As an example, you know, a CEO once came into an organization, and they were trying to, you know, create a culture where people learned how to measure results and be honest and have integrity about those results, you know, because they were not delivering and they weren't measuring anything at all. So they didn't know, you know, what was the problem, where were the gaps, what should we target, because nothing was really getting measured. And they had this culture where nobody wanted to look bad. So they would all bring these status reports to the CEO, you know, meetings and say, oh, look, everything's in the green, everything's in the green. But they were just sort of showing the results and measuring things in a way that they could say everything's in the green, you know. Mm-hmm. And that's not what the CEO wanted, because that doesn't help the business. Until one leader from there, one of his direct reports, had the guts to stand up and say, actually, we're in the red here. And this is the reason. And what the CEO did in that moment, because that was he got out on a limb, right? He was vulnerable there. The CEO stood up and started clapping. And he said, that is exactly what I'm looking for. That is what I'm looking for. That's what's going to make us make this company better. You know, and so when the CEO sort of, and when the top leadership walks the walk like that, that sets a tone that's very, you know, that really starts to penetrate. And then obviously, once they set the tone, it has to cascade down to lower management, right? Because, you know, who an employee deals with on a regular basis is not the CEO, it's their immediate manager, right? So, but by setting the tone, it starts to slowly cascade down to the organization. So I think it's very important that leadership sets the tone and then they walk the walk, especially when it's really hard. So I think those are some of the key sort of key success factors when you're trying to move or shift the culture.
Got it. So you're looking at it from a holistic point of view. So where is the history of the company? You know, how have they come up so far? What's the culture been so far? What the current product is, what the current executive leadership team is. And this is not something that's carved in stone, because as the company evolves and the business requirements change, that culture might have to shift to meet those demands as well, right?
Very, very much. I mean, right now, like the only constant is change, right? Like as there are companies that actually build that excitement over change into their businesses. So they will purposely, as an example, get into a business line that is so different from their current product line for no other reason but to create a culture where people are constantly learning and growing. So they never get comfortable, because you never want your organization to get so comfortable that they're not able to move and grow nimbly, right? Especially in sort of this very global, very evolving climate, things, especially with like new technology, you have to constantly be knowing or being on top of what's coming up and how are we going to prepare for that today? Because you don't want to sort of be on the tail end or lagging behind, you know? And I was going to say also, I mean, sometimes the culture is, you know, is dependent on the product or the line of business. But really what I would say is the culture you're trying to build is not necessarily aligned with the brand of your product itself, but it's more about whatever your product is or whatever your business line is, what kind of people or culture do you need for that to be successful, you know? So as an example, if you are a customer service organization or let me think of one like a hospital, you know, what kind of people do you need in a hospital for a hospital to be successful? Yes, the product of the hospital is medication, surgeries, you know, health services, right? But when you think about what is required to make that a successful organization, you probably need people who are very compassionate, who are extremely accurate, who have a lot of integrity, who are able to, deal with people very well. So these are the things you want to reward and build as a culture in your organization, right?
Correct.
Compared to, as an example, maybe let's say in insurance or banking or some industry where maybe being more careful around risk is important, or maybe an organization where it's a manufacturing organization where safety is a number one priority, right? So then that's the kind of culture you want to build, where people have the courage to stand up and say when something isn't safe, or have the sort of very diligent people, So I would say you're trying to figure out, whatever your product is, what kind of culture, or whatever your business line is, what kind of culture do you need for that company to be successful, or what kind of characteristics do you need your team to demonstrate for that business to be successful? What kind of attitude, what kind of norms? Culture, they say, is what people do when no one's looking. So you're not talking about like skills to do your job. What you're saying is, how do people act when they think nobody cares or nobody's looking at them? That's what you're trying to think about, and then that's what you need to model at the top, and then have it cascade below.
Got it. So then really, by that definition, good culture is just the conglomeration of people that have good character traits, right? Because each of those individuals together will automatically bring about good culture as a whole.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure that it's good or bad culture. I think it's the culture that moves the organization forward and makes it successful. Because what could work really well in one company as a culture won't work in another one, right? Like as an example, maybe the kind of culture you have at Google, great culture for Google, but probably not the best culture for Sun Life Financial, maybe. Do you know what I mean?
Sure,
Like a startup company culture would be very different from a long-standing, maybe even a government organization, So it's not about necessarily good or bad characteristics. I mean, you always want people who have good characteristics and good, good skills and attitude and all of that kind of stuff, right? And those are sort of your baseline, but culture is more about the norms of the organization that make it successful for their business. So it could be very different. So what you have to figure, it's so critical to figure out what kind of norms do you need to have in your business for you to be successful.
got it. So I should say fitting characteristics.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Yes, fit is a key thing. And the other thing also is that when we say fit, we don't mean cookie cutter. We don't mean that everybody is exactly the same, at all, because that doesn't work either. That actually opens up your organization to a lot of risk when you have everyone in your organization who thinks the same, acts the same, sees the same, because what happens is that they'll miss things. They'll have sort of tunnel vision and only be able to see things in one way. And usually that leads to you missing out either on opportunities or not seeing risks before they start. And it usually makes, research shows that homogenous groups do not perform as well as groups that are more diverse, because you have people with different perspectives that are able to see a problem from so many different levels and angles that it leads to much more innovation and risk mitigation. So I'm not saying fit doesn't mean that everyone kind of, just acts like each other. Yeah. But what it means is this diverse group of people have a common language, there's something that's a baseline for them all. And so that's why you can't pick everything. You can't have everything be, define your culture. You have to pick a few things that are the most important and then allow people to be diverse in other aspects. But some things are sort of basic and everyone in the organization, is aligned with it.
Got it. And, this is like in some companies, it's easier to deal with one type of culture because it's one company, and that's the mandate of the companies to have that one culture. But say, for example, in other businesses, say, for example, say a mortgage broker is dealing with, his or her company, but then the day-to-day activities of their business is to interact, say, with the center of influences. So say maybe a realtor or an accountant who's from a different company, you're managing a client who's coming from their own culture. and then you're managing the bank that you're dealing with, because mortgage brokers have access to different banks. So, various cultures there. And then you're dealing with the real estate lawyer who has their own culture. So when you're doing business, you're actually dealing with maybe 5 different companies that have 5 different cultures, and it might be trickier to do business with them as smooth as you were sort of doing business within the one company you're in, right?
That's that you would think so. You would hope so, but it really depends, Gordon, because within a company itself, like depending on the size, right? Because when you have a smaller company, it's a lot easier for everyone to kind of be aligned with a similar expectations, norms, and ways of behaving. When you have a large company, I'll tell you, in most companies that I've worked for, people in the HR, like you have a very strong HR culture, you have a very strong IT culture, you have a very strong marketing culture, operations culture. Any part of the business that you go to, you'll find will have their own subculture. The companies that do this very well, they have a strong, like, overall current of culture, and then you have smaller subcultures within it. You know what I mean? But there are some companies where it's actually very siloed. So it's a real testament to when you have a large company with because different business areas of a company attract different types of people. The type of person that goes into HR tends to be quite different from the type of person who goes into IT, marketing, operations. So when you have people coming in with such diverse characteristics, it's easy to start to form silos where like people are talking at each other and they don't even understand the language they're speaking anymore. And that's actually a common challenge I think many organizations have. And the ones that do it well are the ones who are able to get people to speak a common language and are able to find common ground across multiple divisions, right? So although for sure, dealing with different companies, that certainly comes in, but even within a company itself, this is a major challenge and a key success factor for the company to work well. Because if those divisions are not speaking to each other effectively, that can be a huge risk for the company, or it can be a huge loss of opportunity.
Well, that's interesting, because like you're saying, the marketing department is thinking very differently from the accounting department or the engineering department, right? Their brains are wired differently, their passions are different. So I see what you're saying about subcultures within the general culture you're trying to get a hold of.
Absolutely. And it's always helpful for me whenever I come into a place, especially when I'm, coming into a new organization, is to first seek to understand. I find that to be a really helpful tool, whether it's within my company or outside my company, is first seek to understand their point of view. Look at what is important to this person. So not just what are they trying to get through, what are they trying to get from me, how can I help them? All those are great, but first, what is important to them? What worries them? What drives them? What are they trying to accomplish? And when I start to understand those things, then I can get a little bit into their shoes, into their mindset. Then I'll have a much better shot of being able to work with them so much more effectively. Because I'll understand their language, I'll understand their motivation, and I'll understand what things I do and do not do can either facilitate the relationship or cause barriers in the relationship. And there's this common line in our business where we say culture eats strategy for breakfast. You know what I mean? So like you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have people that are able to talk to each other and come to an understanding and work well together, what are the chances that strategy will actually yield the fruit that you're looking for it to yield?
Got it. Wow, no, that's really interesting. I never thought of those things. We've got a few minutes left. If I can just ask you in our final few minutes,
Yeah.
Just bringing it down to someone who's applying for the job, and based from your experience and your background, what is the best way that someone can prepare to apply for a job? I mean, there's basic things like, get your resume in order, do a little bit, research about the role, the position, the company. Is there anything else you might recommend to someone to prepare for, so that they make a very good impression when they're doing that interview?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gordon. If I had to pick, because there's tons, like you said, there's tons of really great resources and tips on all of these things. If I was to pick a couple of key things, I think, like I'm thinking back to my last job search. One of the key things I would say is come in and show why you are different. Like I see this a lot on people's resumes. When people write their resumes or when they give their interview answers, they tend to talk about just what they did in the job. I did this, I got this done, I got this done, I got this done. And I always say to them, don't write it from that perspective. Don't answer the question, what did I do in that job? Answer the question of, what did I do that somebody else would not have done? What unique thing did I bring to this job that it actually got done because of me, like because I was the kind of person that I am. So that I would say, like, that's the key thing. Show what makes you unique. Think about if somebody who didn't have your skills, your talent, your motivation, your attitude was doing that job, how different would the job have been? How different would the result and outcome have been? And I find that when I ask that question, then people start to think of things like, oh yeah, this is where I did that above and beyond. This is where, because I had integrity, I pointed this thing out, or because I took initiative, we were able to identify this particular thing. And that tends to change the language on their resume. It tends to give it a lot more energy. It tends to give it a lot more passion. So that's the number one thing I would say is figure out what makes you unique. Like, what unique thing do you bring to the job? And how did that job get done differently because you particularly were in it, And then the second thing I would say is come with passion, show why you care about this job. A lot of times some organizations do hire for skills and expertise. Obviously, there needs to be a baseline of those, but many of them are looking for your attitude. They're looking for your fit with the organization. They're looking to know that you're going to come in and be a great person on their team, right? Because you don't want to hire what I've heard once a leader in this industry called a talented terror. Someone who's just really good at what they do. They just don't work well in the organization. So come in and show that you have passion for this, for what you are coming in for. And the third thing I would say is not just about researching the company in terms of just like go on their website and take a look at what they do, but get to know the company and show why you are a good fit for that company. So when I came to my recent company, like I soaked in everything I could about them. Like I, even actually currently in my job. So this doesn't end, just with the job interview, right? Many of us are on probation for a while, but even if you're not, like, soak up everything. Like I listened to the CEO's speeches. I went on YouTube and I checked out videos of them and when were they in the news and, what did employees say on Glassdoor about them? And, I just tried to soak up everything. And then I tried to figure out, okay, why would this company be a great fit for me? And why would I be a great fit for it? And I think that was really helpful as well, because when I came into my job interview, I was able to show them, first of all, this is why I am unique. This is why you should hire me. This is what I will bring to the table, because this is what I brought to the table in my previous jobs. I was able to show how passionate I am about the work that I do, because then you'll know I care. This is not about punching in and punching out. I care, which means every day I'm going to come in and figure out how I can do my work better. And the third thing is, I love this company and I love what you do. Your mission resonates with me, which means I'm going to come in every day and not just figure out how I can do better, but how we can do better as an organization. So I think maybe I'm hoping that those three things, apart from all the regular, do your resume well, obviously prepare for interviews. Actually, if I could give just one more really tactical, I know it's sort of a smaller tip, but really tactical tip, is before you go for interviews, what I used to do is I would think of questions, look at the job interview, think of what questions, if I was an interviewer, what kind of questions would I ask to make sure someone can do this job? And then I would prepare for them, but a lot of times what I would do is I'd kind of make little notes to myself of, oh yeah, this is what I would say. And what I found really, really helpful is actually saying them out loud. Like you'd be surprised how, like, even though I know what I did in my previous jobs, it just comes out with a whole bunch of like ums and ahs and, and so what I did was I will always do this. I will say my responses out loud, and sometimes I will actually record it, or sometimes I will get a mentor or a colleague to hear it for me. But what I find really helpful is I'll say it 2 or 3 times, and I'm always amazed that by the third time, just by virtue of saying the same thing 3 times, I have actually gotten to a much tighter, much more succinct, much more effective response to the question. And it prepares me in a much more effective way for the interview. So that would be my little tip.
No, that's amazing. And that's, listening back, reflecting on how you sound, your tone, your energy, and, sort of checking, is that passion coming out when I'm speaking? Because when we're speaking, we really don't have an objective view of that, right? But recording it and replaying it back. No, these points are great. And leading back to what you were saying initially, by focusing on these points, you'll actually showcase what your character is. And then the person that's interviewing you will see how well you'll be able to fit into their culture and add value to their culture. So that's great.
Absolutely, because you can train me to learn a skill, but you can't really train me to have a particular character, or you can't really, it's much harder to infuse passion and infuse attitudes than it is to train for a skill.
Correct. Yeah. And, I keep mentioning Tony Robbins on some of these podcasts, but he also says when he's hiring people, can they do the job? First, second, will they do the job?
Yeah.
And third, how well will they fit in the team? So it really resonates with what you're saying. Krystal, thanks so much for coming on board and sharing some of this amazing information. I know our listeners are going to take it and, the next job that they apply for, even if they're not applying, if they're just sort of working in the company and thinking how to better their culture, you've given some awesome advice. So once again, I thank you for that, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks so much, Corden.